When I told my family I was buying a house, they laughed so hard my brother nearly spilled his beer. But they weren't laughing when the realtor handed me the keys. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. Anyway, that night still burns in my memory. We were sitting around my mother's dining table. Wade cracking open another beer, Mara scrolling on her phone, and Mom criticizing the casserole I brought. I'd barely finished saying the words, "I'm thinking of buying a house," before the laughter started. Wade slapped the table saying, "What, a dollhouse?" Mom chuckled, shaking her head. "Tessa, honey, you can barely afford your car insurance. Let's not pretend." Their words stung, but I kept my face neutral. I just stirred my mashed potatoes and smiled like their mockery didn't cut deep. They saw me as the quiet one, the family disappointment, always helping others, never demanding more. What they didn't know was that I'd been saving for years, quietly, methodically, while everyone else bragged about credit cards and vacations. Wade started listing all the grown-up things I'd supposedly never managed. Owning a house, running a business, making real money. Mara laughed and said, "Maybe she'll get a trailer." That counts, right? I let them talk. Every jab only made me calmer, colder. Mom topped it off with, "You should focus on finding a nice man instead of chasing dreams you can't afford." I looked up, met her eyes, and smiled just enough to unsettle her. Maybe I already found what I need. The table went quiet for a second, then Wade snorted, breaking the tension. I didn't defend myself after that. I just sat there, listening to their laughter echo in my ears like a dare. Later, as I drove home through the rain, my hands tight on the steering wheel, I whispered to myself, "Let them laugh. Just a little longer." When I was 17, the world went quiet. My father, Harold Marlowe, passed away on a cold February morning, leaving behind a cabin deep in the woods and a patch of forgotten land that everyone else called worthless. Mom wasted no time selling what she could, insisting it was for the family's future. But I knew that meant hers and Wade's, not mine. What she didn't know was that Dad had left something else, something hidden in the quiet pages of an old will. His friend Mr. Delaney, the man who used to stop by the cabin for coffee and chess, had set up a small trust fund in my name. He said my father once helped him through hard times, and this was his way of paying it forward. I didn't touch that money for years. I just let it grow slowly, quietly, like a seed buried deep under snow. While Mom and Wade flaunted new cars and vacations, I kept my life small. Assistant bookkeeper, tiny apartment, old hatchback. That was all they saw. I never corrected them. I learned to smile when they teased me about my simple life. They thought I was clueless. In truth, I was planning. Every paycheck went into savings. Every lunch break, I browsed old county records and property maps. I wasn't just dreaming of a house. I was searching for something specific. Something that used to belong to my father. At work, Liam started noticing. He was one of the few who actually looked past the surface. "You're always staring at those listings," he said one afternoon, leaning against my desk. I shrugged it off, but he kept watching, curious. Eventually, I told him I liked reading deeds. How names change, how land moves through hands. He smiled. "You're the quiet kind of smart, huh?" One night, after everyone left, I scrolled through a new set of listings. My heart skipped. A familiar address appeared. An old farmhouse sitting near where Dad's land once stretched. The description said, "Recently listed. Estate property." I stared at the screen, pulse racing. It was for sale. The next family dinner felt different. Wade couldn't stop talking, waving his fork like a salesman. "Big things are coming," he said, glancing at Mom. "We're finally doing something smart with Dad's old land." I froze mid-bite. They told everyone years ago it had been sold, gone, worthless. Now they were bragging about it like they owned it again. Mom leaned back, proud. "A developer's interested," she said. "We're negotiating the deal next week. It's prime land now, worth a fortune." I kept my expression calm, though my stomach twisted. They didn't notice the way my fingers tightened around my glass. My father's name echoed in my head. That land was his legacy, and they were about to cash in on it. That night, I went home and pulled out the old papers I'd collected over the years. Copies of deeds, tax records, signatures. One detail stood out like a wound. The signature on the transfer forms. It looked like my father's, but not quite. My breath caught. He'd already been sick when those documents were dated. There was no way he could have signed them. They forged it. My own family forged my father's name. I stared at the papers until the words blurred. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was betrayal. They'd stolen from him from me. I wanted to confront them right then, but anger wouldn't fix this. Not yet. The next morning, I took a deep breath and called the realtor listed on the property I'd seen before. His name was Glenn. When I met him, I asked a single question. Who owned it now? He shuffled through the file, frowning slightly. Interesting, he said. There were some issues with the old paperwork. But everything's been corrected recently. The Marlowe name isn't on the deed anymore. I blinked. Who fixed it? He smiled faintly. Mr. Delaney's lawyer handled it, I believe. For a moment I couldn't speak. My father's friend, gone for years, was still protecting what mattered most. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped out of the car. The old farmhouse stood at the edge of the woods, leaning slightly, windows clouded with dust, paint peeling in soft curls. The air smelled like damp leaves and memory. I walked slowly toward the porch, running my fingers along the railing my father once built. I could almost hear his voice, telling me to watch my step, laughing when I tripped over my shoelaces. It felt like the past had been waiting for me all this time. Glenn greeted me with a warm smile, clipboard in hand. It's a fixer-upper, he said, half apologetic. I looked around at the crooked shutters, the field stretching behind the trees, the faint sound of birds cutting through the quiet. It's perfect, I whispered. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but I could see what it could become. Light would fall across the kitchen window in the mornings just like it used to. Glenn began explaining numbers, programs, and fees, but one sentence broke through everything else. You actually qualify for a first-time buyer program, he said. Low interest, minimal down payment. I almost laughed, not because it was funny but because it felt like the universe had just cracked open for me. I signed each paper carefully, my hands steady, heart racing. The sound of the pen scratching felt like a promise. A week later we gathered for dinner again. Mom was already mid-story about Wade's big project, when she turned to me. Still pretending to buy a house? She asked, smirking. I hope you didn't waste your paycheck on application fees. Wade chuckled, shaking his head. She probably toured one place and chickened out. I smiled faintly, letting their words pass through me. There was nothing left to defend. That night my phone buzzed as I was washing dishes. I answered quietly. Glenn's voice came through, warm and certain. Congratulations, Tess. The house is yours. I stood still, water dripping from my hands as the truth sank in. For the first time in years, something was truly mine. I called them on a Thursday evening, keeping my voice light. There's something I want to show you this weekend, I said. Mom sounded skeptical right away. What is it now, Tessa? Wade laughed in the background. Another open house fantasy? I didn't argue. I just said, you'll see, and hung up before they could question me further. Saturday arrived clear and bright, the kind of day that made everything feel sharp and real. I stood by the front gate of the farmhouse, the keys still warm in my hand. The white paint on the porch gleamed faintly in the sun. My heart was steady. This was the moment I'd waited for. Their car pulled up, Wade's music blaring. Mom stepped out first, her lips tight, eyes scanning the property. So this is what you dragged us out here for? She asked, unimpressed. Looks like it's falling apart. Wade circled the car, smirking. Don't tell me you're renting this place. You could at least pick something newer. Before I could answer, Glenn walked out from the front door, papers tucked under his arm. Good morning, he said politely. Miss Marlowe, everything's ready. Mom blinked. Miss Marlowe. Glenn smiled and handed me a small set of keys. Congratulations. Welcome home. The sound of metal against my palm was like thunder. Wade froze mid-laugh. You bought this, he stammered. His tone had shifted, sharp and disbelieving. Mom's face went pale. Tessa, you didn't. How could you? She stopped, words catching in her throat as realization began to settle in. I looked at both of them, calm now, all the years of mockery dissolving in the air between us. Actually, I said softly, I just took back what was stolen. For a long moment no one spoke. Glenn excused himself quietly, leaving us in the heavy silence. Mom's lips trembled as if she wanted to deny something but she couldn't. The truth was already written in her eyes. I led them inside without saying a word. The air smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh paint. Sunlight cut through the dusty windows, falling across the worn wooden floors. On the table in the middle of the room lay a single folder, thick, creased, waiting. Mom's eyes darted toward it immediately. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked, her tone sharp. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder and slid the documents toward them. The top page showed my father's name in faded ink, his real signature, steady, distinct. Underneath it lay another version of the same deed, the one filed years later. Even at a glance, the difference was unmistakable. Wade leaned closer, his face tightening. "Where did you get these?" "I found them in county records," I said simply. "And the lawyer who handled Dad's affairs confirmed it." Mom's mouth twitched. "This doesn't prove anything," she snapped, voice rising. "You're misreading it." Wade turned on her, jaw clenched. "Mom, that's not his signature. You told me it was handled legally." Her eyes widened, panic flickering behind them. "Don't you dare blame me. You were part of it too. You signed the transfer forms." The argument unraveled fast. Voices overlapped, accusations flying. I stood still, watching them tear at each other, their alliance cracking open like old paint. For years they'd laughed at me, dismissed me, but now the truth had them choking on their own lies. When the noise finally broke into silence, I spoke quietly. "You both took what wasn't yours. But now I own all of it, legally." Mom's eyes glistened and Wade's fists tightened at his sides, but neither could find the words to fight back. I walked to the door and opened it wide. "It's time to leave." They hesitated, but the tone in my voice left no room for argument. When they finally stepped outside, I closed the door behind them. The latch clicked softly, echoing through the empty hallway, a single sound that felt like an ending. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the stillness. Finally felt like mine. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. News spread quietly at first. A cancelled deal, a few whispers around town, but soon the truth reached everyone. The investigation into the forged documents reopened, and with it, everything my family had built on those lies began to unravel. The developer withdrew from their agreement within days, citing legal inconsistencies. Their dream project was dead before the ground even broke. Wade tried to bluff his way through it, telling anyone who'd listen that it was just a paperwork issue. But when the bank started calling and the local paper hinted at fraud, the facade crumbled. He showed up at Mom's place every day, shouting into his phone, blaming everyone but himself. Mom looked smaller each time I caught a glimpse of her in town, her perfect posture gone, her confidence cracked. Then Mara left. Word was she packed her things in one night and drove to her sister's, leaving a single note on the counter. "I'm tired of being married to a man who chases money." I wasn't surprised. Mara had always loved appearances more than people. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just kept rebuilding my life, watching it all unfold like a movie I'd already seen too many times. There was no satisfaction in their downfall, only a strange, quiet ache. Maybe it was pity. Maybe just exhaustion. A few weeks later my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the silence after my hello told me who it was. Mom's voice trembled on the other end. "Tessa, everything's gone. I don't know what to do. Please, can we talk?" For a moment I almost answered the way I always used to. But then I remembered the forged papers, the laughter, the years of being dismissed. I held the phone close, listening to her breathe through tears. "I hear you," I said softly. Then I ended the call and let the silence settle around me again. The farmhouse looked different that evening. Warm light spilling from every window, soft music humming in the background, and the smell of roasted herbs drifting through the kitchen. It had been months since the last nail was hammered, the last brushstroke dried. Now it was time to fill the silence with laughter again. Liam arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and his usual easy grin. "It feels like a real home now," he said, setting it on the table. Glenn followed soon after with a pie from the bakery, and a few neighbors trickled in. People who had helped carry lumber, share coffee, or wave from the end of the lane. The table gleamed beneath the light, simple but full, warm plates, bright laughter, stories bouncing off the old wooden walls. I sat among them, listening to their voices mix with the soft creak of the house. For the first time in years I felt something steady, peaceful, like the world had finally exhaled. The air held no bitterness, no ghosts. Just life returning quietly and completely. Then through the window I noticed movement near the edge of the driveway. A figure stood half in the shadows, still and hesitant. It took only a second to recognize her. She was thinner, her hair streaked with gray. She didn't move closer, just watched from a distance, arms wrapped around herself as if the night wind had found her before I did. For a moment I couldn't breathe. There was a flicker of something, sadness maybe, but it didn't root itself. I turned back toward the light, toward the laughter that filled the room. Without a word, I walked to the window and drew the curtains closed, shutting out the cold and everything that had come before it. Liam raised his glass, catching my eye across the table. "To new beginnings," he said, smiling. I lifted mine, meeting his gaze. "To new beginnings," I echoed, the warmth of the moment wrapping around me like home. The house was finally complete. Every wall gleamed with fresh paint, the floors smooth beneath my feet, the scent of cedar and varnish still clinging to the air. Only one room remained untouched, the small study at the end of the hallway. My father's space. I'd avoided it until now, afraid of what memories might still linger inside. The door creaked softly as I pushed it open. Dust floated in the sunlight that filtered through the half-closed blinds. The desk still stood where it always had, its surface scratched, a few old nails left in the corner. I ran my fingers along the grain of the wood, tracing the same lines he once worked over late at night. Felt like touching time itself. I opened the window and the cool autumn breeze rushed in, carrying the same scent of fallen leaves that filled the air the day he died. For a moment I closed my eyes and just breathed. The wind brushed against my skin and I could almost hear him again, his voice steady, gentle, saying I'd figure things out someday. I smiled quietly to myself. He was right. I had. The study didn't need much, just a small repair to the window frame, a polish to the old chair, and the picture of us restored on the shelf. When I stepped back, the room looked whole again, like it had been waiting for me to finish the story he started. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the house filled with the golden glow of evening. The walls no longer echoed with loneliness. They carried peace now, earned not given. In that moment it all came full circle. "They laughed when I said I could afford it," I murmured, glancing around. But what I bought wasn't just a house, it was the truth. I walked to the front door, turned the key gently and locked it behind me. The latch clicked, final and soft. Stepping down the porch, the wind caught my hair and for the first time in my life I felt completely free. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from them after everything they did? Or should I have given them one last chance? Tell me in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.